General Antonio Guterres has asked Western nations to emulate Africa and open their borders to migrants and refugees. Guterres, who is in Ethiopia, held a meeting with African Union Commission chairperson Moussa Faki Mahamat and pledged to support Africa's peace efforts as one way of stemming displacements on the continent. He welcomed the South Sudan and Central African peace agreements as well as the restoration of relations between Eritrea and Ethiopia. Guterres also pointed out that the world will need to pay more attention to climate change in order to stop the exodus of climate change migrants from the continent. This month's African Union Summit will discuss ways of ending perennial displacement in Africa.
Africa is home to 14.7 million internally displaced persons and 7.3 million refugees. 3 African countries, Ethiopia, Uganda and Kenya, lead the list of the world's top hosts of refugees. Now the United Nations wants Western nations to help Africa shoulder this burden.
There are more African migrants in other African countries than in Europe, contrary to what many people think. And in Africa, this has been managed in a much more humane way.
The continent has set itself a 2020 target to end conflict. Recent events, all of them Africa-led, have brought a flicker of hope that silencing the guns is possible.
This is the moment in which a wind of hope is blowing in Africa. We have seen the reconciliation between Ethiopia and Eritrea. We have seen peace agreements that were established in South Sudan, in CAR. We are working together also to see if we move in the same direction in Libya. We have seen elections that people were forecasting that they would lead to a tragedy, to violence, and that in the end took place in a peaceful context.
Climate change, economic distress as well as conflicts have led to the influx of refugees. The 32nd Ordinary Session of African Union Heads of State and Government will seek solutions on how best to stem the exodus from the continent.
We are losing the race with climate change, and this can be a disaster for Africa and for the world. And Africa will pay an even higher price because of the dramatic impacts in the continent and the fact that Africa doesn't contribute much to the warming of the planet.
Nous sommes disposés, engagés.
We are ready to continue pushing for peace and stability, to stop conflicts before they start, because there is a direct link between peace, insecurity and development. For example, in South Sudan, Chad, Horn of Africa region, we see that direct link.
Meanwhile, the new Partnership for Development for Africa, NEPAD, has been renamed to the African Union Development Agency, NEPAD, with a mandate to promote regional integration as the continental body seeks to implement the African Continental Free Trade Area. Sarah Kemani, SABC News, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.